All right, welcome everybody. It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I noticed a few people on this side of the room. All the presenters will be over here on the other side of the column from you. So you may want to come on over, find a seat, or at the very least, make sure the column isn't in your way. So thank you so much for coming today. Today we are going to be having a panel of people who are going to be talking about their educational conference experiences over the last year. What's up? It's not meant to be for the room. It's meant to be for Zoom. Thank you for checking though. So a bunch of the people who are going to present today were awarded the EETI Travel Fellowship to attend these educational conferences. If you're unaware, this travel fellowship happens in every spring. We have an application cycle, and it is full funding to attend an educational conference. Generally, we give highest priority to people who are attending for the first time, as well as instructional faculty, given that most research faculty have research budgets that can help them go to conferences, whereas instructional faculty do not. So if you are at all interested in this opportunity and these presentations sound interesting to you, please send an email to me, let me know you're interested, and I'll make sure that you're up to date with the spring application cycle when it goes out. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. If our presenters will please go ahead and come and take a seat up front. The way this is going to go is each presenter will give a quick 5 minutes on their conference experience. And then at the end, we'll have a collective Q&A for the whole panel. You're welcome to ask questions to specific people or to ask questions to the panel as a whole about their experiences. This is the mic for the people on Zoom. I'm going to ask that it be passed around between presenters. So Rashida, you are up first. Sonia was also going to present during this block, but please excuse us because she was not feeling well today. She sends her condolences. Yeah, I think there's only one slide. Yeah.
Alrighty. Oh, I guess I don't have to stand then. So hi everyone. I am Dr. Rashida Lewis, and I am going to be talking to you about Jedi related conferences. And so this year in 2020, gotta add that 2 in there. Dr. Garcia and I have been to several conferences over the course of this calendar year. NSBE isn't up here, but probably because it happened in March. So it was last academic year, but it was in this calendar year. But in any case, so we have been to the National Society of Black Engineers annual conference in March. We went to the Society of Women Engineers conference, which was 2 weeks ago in Houston. The Society of Hispanic and Professional Engineers conference is this upcoming weekend. We have a group of students that are leaving tomorrow to Charlotte for that conference. And then there is also the OSTEM conference, which stands for Out in STEM. I don't know when that conference is, and maybe Sonia has sort of specifics that she was planning to go to for that conference. But part of the reason why we've been participating in these conferences is one, from a personal affiliation. So I'm a NSBE member, I am a SHPE member, I'm a SHPE member. So part of that is just sort of being a member of these organizations does tend to lead to, going to conferences or networking opportunities, professional development opportunities as a faculty member and as a student, but also the opportunity for us to have a table at the career fair and potentially recruit new graduate students and potentially some undergraduate students, because some of these conferences do offer sort of pre-collegiate aspects to their conferences as well. So this is a way that the University of Georgia is really sort of living up to its promise of trying to improve our diversity and inclusion efforts, particularly as it comes to recruiting students of diverse backgrounds. So this year was the first year that NSBE, that UGA has had a table at the NSBE Career Fair. We did not get in to SWE in time, but it was the first time that we had sent a group of women to SWE. And I think we sent about 20, somewhere between 15 and 20 women to SWE. NSBE, we had 16 students. That was actually in Anaheim, California. SWE was in Houston. SHPE, we have 20 students going up this weekend. And then again, I'm not familiar about the plans with OSTEM, but I do know what it stands for. So yeah, this has been a great opportunity, not only again for the faculty that are going, especially for the students. All of our students have at least had interviews during these conferences. So these conferences are major opportunities for students to get internships and potentially full-time opportunities with the companies that are there. So lots of our students have had interviews. Many of them had those interviews turn into offers, whether for internships or full-time positions. So I would say probably at least half of the students who have attended these conferences have walked away with something more than swag. And yeah, and it's also just an opportunity to connect with students. So, a lot of the students who go to these conferences, at least thus far, like they haven't had me as a professor, but I've seen them around. So it's an opportunity to be able to connect with students, and then also connect with the dean, because he has been very active and participating in these conferences as well. So for students who may only know the dean in name only, had an opportunity to really like see him, interact with him, and get to know the guy who calls all the shots, from the student perspective. So it's been a really cool opportunity for them to connect with upper level faculty and also people across the country. So these are national conferences. So if you think about, your community here at UGA, and then what that looks like amplified at a national scale. So, NSBE being a national conference for Black engineers, SWE being a national conference for women engineers, right? You're literally in these communities that everyone there looks like you. And so it's a really affirming place for our students. And we've gotten positive feedback from those who've attended. Again, most of these conferences have been the first that many have attended, primarily due to COVID, right? So there was a pause on conferences that our students weren't able to attend. So this has been the first time that a lot of them have been able to attend these conferences and see, essentially their local communities amplify in such a way. And there's a bond that each of these people created with each other, and again with faculty during these conferences. So I'm really happy that we are supporting our students in this way. And I look forward to us continuing to provide these opportunities for our students to participate in these conferences. And there's also a regional NSBE conference that we're sending students to this weekend as well. So yeah.
Again, we're going to save all questions until the end. Next, we have Ben.
Thank you. So I went to the teaching professor conference this year. It was the first time I went. I liked it a lot. Let me just tell you first about the format. It is different. The sessions are, if I remember correctly, 90 minutes. I think they had shorter sessions that were maybe an hour long. So these are not quick presentations about some small project, some research that people are doing. These are more like mini workshops, but I found it really valuable to attend these workshops. If anything, I was overwhelmed by how many great options seem to be there, and you obviously can't attend them all. You can go to 3 or 4 a day if they're an hour and a half each, right? And there are usually 3 or 4 concurrent sessions, so you gotta pick something that most interests you. Another thing that I liked about this was that instructors from all fields were present. I thought sometimes I get the impression at ASEE that it's the same people kicking around the same ideas year after year, and it's nice to hear things from people outside of engineering. I think we can learn a lot from people outside of engineering. I think a lot of it isn't applicable to engineering, but a lot of it is, or is adaptable for engineering. So I think it's great for that. and nearly everybody there was in higher ed. One of my favorite sessions, I'll talk briefly about two of them. One was about backward course design, which is it's sort of illuminating once you realize that that's the way it should be done. All right. So backwards course design, instead of thinking about how much content you want to cover during the semester, start thinking about what you want your students to be able to do at the end of the semester that they can't do at the beginning of the semester. And then find a way to get them to do that. And it's maybe, you know, overall, you want to think about it on the semester scale, but you can also think about it over the month or the week or the day. What do you want them to do at the end of a class period that they couldn't do beforehand? Right. So there was a great session on backward course design. And I'm, you know, taking that to heart now. With teaching a new course for the first time, I could cover a lot of material and it's not going to do anybody any good. I've been telling my students a lot this semester that when I was a freshman and I took the undergraduate engineering physics class for all the engineers, that intro to physics, my professor covered 18 chapters in 16 weeks and nobody learned a thing. And so I was like, all right, well, covering material is not the goal here. The goal is to get students to learn something, to be able to do something that they couldn't do before. So there was a great session on that. There was another session on reframing office hours. I know people in ED have talked about this before. Just the term office hours is a bit intimidating. It's sort of showing that it's on the property of the instructor, right? It's in their office. You have to intrude to attend the office hours. Where and students still of mine, they ask me if they can come to my office hours that I have set in the, like, you don't need an appointment, you don't need to ask, you can just drop in, right? So there was a session on reframing office hours, not just renaming them, but also taking student input on when they should be, on where they could be, so they don't have to be in the office. Yeah, I thought the entire conference was great. I included some links if you want to look at them. There's also an online version of the conference. I don't know anything about that, but it seems to be a popular choice. I went to the in-person conference and I thought it was well worth my time and attention and Edie's money. And next slide, am I going again? So while I was there at the teaching professor conference, Jasmine and I went and she presented. I say we presented, but it was Jasmine. At the grading conference. This is a conference that I've been to in the past. I mostly missed it this past year because I was at the teaching professor conference. This conference, I think it's only 3 years old. I started going to it because I heard about it at a time when I was really dissatisfied with the grades that I was giving. And I don't mean that they were all really good or all really bad. I thought they were meaningless. I thought the percentage grade on assignments was meaningless. I thought the average of those weighted to certain categories was meaningless. And I just had no confidence that what I was assigning was meaningful in any way. And I heard about this grading conference. It's sort of just in the conference, they talk about alternative forms of grading. And there are a few different alternative forms. The one that I focused on, and I think the one that the conference focuses on, is called standards-based grading, where, sorry, I'm getting into plugging standards-based grading. I'm happy to talk about standards-based grading, and whether you want to hear about it or not, I'm happy to talk about it. But I'll just tell you, for the conference, it's there's sort of two tracks. There's a track for beginners where you can just learn what it is, how you do it, why you might want to do it. And then there's sort of another track for people who have done it before or have some experience with it. And we can just talk about what's working well, what's not working well, how to manage the grades and all that. I really enjoy this conference for the first couple times. I think I've done it enough times now where I'm not learning much anymore, but it's a great sort of on ramp. If you're interested in an alternative grading approach, if you feel at all dissatisfied with your grading approach now, I'd highly recommend it. It's very cheap. Yeah, I'm plugging both of these conferences. This one is more niche. It's only if you don't like the current grading scheme you're using.
But if that describes you, this conference is incredibly cheap to attend. So if you're at all interested, please reach out to me. This is a lot easier to fund than going through the whole travel fellowship process.
Yeah.
It's very cheap.
Don't look at the trend here. Just look at the numbers. The first year it was 0, second year it was 10, third year it was 50. Don't look at the trend. I think it's never gonna be more than $100. And even though it said it was 50, if you just say any reason why you can't afford that 50, they'll give you access for free.
All right. So thank you. Okay, it's time to see. We're going to be ping-ponging the mic around a bit. So next up is Jasmine. We're going to transition to the ASEE. We'll have 3 people talking about this conference. This is the biggest conference that we send people to through our travel fellowship.
I was like, what's happening?
First up, we're going to have Jasmine.
Hello. I was one of the 2 Dean's Engineering Education Fellows last year, and this was like my closing experience on the year, I would say, because it's like the last major event, I guess, of the DEEF. Also plug for the DEEF. If you want to talk about that later, we also can do that. So like many graduate students that my experience has kind of been colored by COVID. This was my first in-person conference since my first year of graduate school. So that's a bit crazy because I'm in my last year of my PhD. And just like getting to go in person compared with any of the online conferences I attended over my graduate experience, it was just like the experience was unmatched. I know it's like time and money to go, but I just really feel like the level of professional development that I gained from actually going was a lot more valuable than what I gained online personally, just in the conferences that I personally attended. Online, it just wasn't as much interaction as I'd hoped, and like networking is an important thing for me right now since I'm going to graduate soon. So just getting to actually speak with other people and make those connections were really important. So I was able to attend a lot of different workshops. The theme this year was excellence through diversity. So there were workshops on like breaking through embedded hierarchies. Let's see what else. How to become an inclusive leader. That was one of my favorite ones. So there was a lot of workshops related to diversity and inclusion, but there were also a lot of sessions based on like teaching practices in different respective engineering fields. So that was super interesting. There were groups. I'm personally in environmental engineering, specifically in energy, and there were multiple sessions on both of those things. So that was super cool just to know there were others that are interested in the same sort of thing. So yes, was able to learn about new teaching methods too, and going to those more specific sessions. And like I said before, just simply able to interact with people face to face and network, which were on my list of priorities in going to ASEE. and then just some fun pictures, just, got to like explore a new city. I'd never been to Minneapolis before, so I got to go see the sculpture garden. One of our previous graduate students, Amy, if anyone remembers her, she was there. So we got to like reconnect over some yummy food, which was exciting. And I got to network with her more. And also, I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but I don't live alone. So sometimes writing at home is really difficult. So simply just having a hotel room to myself to be able to sit and write was actually super helpful. So it wasn't even that like I got behind on any schoolwork by taking a couple days to go. So yeah, highly recommend. I really enjoyed my experience. So thankful to have had the opportunity to go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of you may know my area is engineering communication. I'm an English teacher by training, and I assume people in other areas have the same phenomenon where you just can't turn your brain off. Like whatever you study, whatever you work on, you just see it everywhere. I'm a complete language nerd. Like whatever Ben was saying he could talk to you about, I could talk to you about that twice as long, about like semicolons and the passive voice and stuff. It's a disease. I mean, it really is. And there is no medication for it. But there are times when I would like to just, go to the hotel lobby and have breakfast and not be confronted with this violence of scrambled eggs. But I'm what in language is called a descriptivist, not a prescriptivist. So I don't believe in prescribing rules that everybody has to follow. I believe in creating rules based on what people do, which mean, well, there you go. We are educators after all. And so I actually got my eggs and whatever else I had and sat down and looked up. Maybe scrambled is something I've never heard of before. Maybe that's scarab beetle, which if I had thought of that, I wouldn't have eaten the eggs because I don't like beetles. But no, there is no such thing as scrambled. Not yet. But that's the thing. There are a lot of words, especially in English, that start out this kind of way, where there'll be a mistake, and for whatever reason, it takes on enough traction that it just becomes, and linguists will look back at it and say, this sign in medieval England misspelled it, but everybody just latched on and ran with it. And that's why we have scrambled eggs or faux wrench toast or something like that. So anyway, this was just, I got caught. I was taking a picture of it and the server was like, why are you taking a picture of my sign? And so I had to, lie and say like, oh, it's, you wouldn't understand. It's an in joke between me and my buddy. You wouldn't understand, which is not totally a lie. It is an in joke between me and my English teacher friends. But anyway, that's my fun picture before I get into the actual stuff. So if you will. So ASEE, I didn't think to like break down what this conference is like. I assumed a lot of people would know. And ASEE is massive. I mean, even post-COVID with worries about what attendance is going to be like. I forget the exact numbers, but I mean, I think we were 3,800 to 4,000 people, something like that. I mean, it's a big conference. With all kinds of sessions, all kinds of events to go to. This is my 18th one, I think. 2004 is the first one I went to. But I also just in June rotated off the board of directors for ASEE. So, and what that means is I was still on the board during this conference. So I did not have the opportunity to like go through the program and say, oh, I want to go to this session and I want to go to this session. And oh, this looks interesting, because I had board meetings and stuff related to it almost all the time that I was there. I'm not complaining. I was glad to do it, but I didn't get to look around a whole lot. However, I was able to go to this very important conference or this very important session, 20 years of engineering communication at that other engineering college. So a little bit of background about this. I came here from Mississippi State. Mississippi State's rival is Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. It goes by Ole Miss. People in Starkville, which is where Mississippi State is, have taken to not saying the name of Ole Miss. And actually our former, well, this is several football coaches ago, Dan Mullen coined TSUN, the school up north. And so people would just call it T-Sun instead of saying Ole Miss. It's silly, but it's just sort of a fun thing to do. But I did find when that's so ingrained in me that I was typing this I felt bad about typing the name of the school. So I just said that other engineering college, and I'll let you figure out what it is. If you don't know, I'll tell you after the session. But anyway, so it's 20 years of engineering communication at this other school. I believe it's in Atlanta. 6 of their 8 engineering schools have in-house engineering communication programs. Now, one of the reasons I was interested in this is that when I was hired at Mississippi State to begin that engineering communication program, one of the first things I did, and this was in 1999, is I secured a travel grant to go visit a couple of programs that were already up and running, because I wanted to see how they did things in person. I wanted to see, really importantly, how they interacted with students. I wanted to talk to students about what the programs were like and how useful they were. So I went to Virginia Tech and I went to University of Texas at Austin, which had at that point programs that were 10 plus years old. And that really informed the way that I kind of designed or helped design. I didn't do it by myself, obviously, the engineering communication program at Mississippi State. And so getting to hear this, I looked at in a similar way. I've been here a little over 3 years. And so I was like, well, these folks have been around a while. Let me see what I can, blatantly steal from them and call it our own. But so they have the 6 of 8 engineering schools have in-house programs. I took a huge amount of notes about all these different ones, but in the interest of time, I decided to pick the one that I think is the most fully formed, which to my eyes and ears seemed to be electrical and computer engineering. ECE alone has about 2,300 students, they said, and about 115 faculty. Their engineering communication folks are fully embedded in the curriculum. Now, what that means is they, in addition to whatever standalone classes they may take, or writing classes, or presenting classes, or whatever you want to call it, they work with technical courses throughout a student's career to exploit the writing that's already there, whether it's in capstone design, whether it's in a advanced intermediate circuits or something like that in a second or a third year. And so they work with the writing that's already there. One of the problems with engineering communication instruction historically is that for a long time, it only existed as a standalone course in an English department outside of engineering that was often designed without input from engineering. And in fact, it often had like physics students, poultry science. So it was like a writing in the professions course, which for sure has some positives. But then, in my opinion anyway, the negatives of a system like that vastly outweigh the positives, because it's just disconnected. It's not part of what is actually done. And so when you have an embedded program like this, as I am here at this college, what we really want to get after is a way where you have people like me working with faculty in the college on the writing that actually goes on already in these classes to help improve the writing that way, instead of creating, different types of experiences. Now, there's a lot of positives for a standalone course too, which we have, but it was interesting to hear them talk about, the full breadth of stuff that they offer. They have a dedicated studio space. 3 full-time engineering communication faculty just in ECE alone. So not for the whole college, just ECE. Each of these schools have their own people that work on engineering communication there. They have 15 graduate students dedicated to engineering communication, and 55 undergraduate peer leaders, which is really interesting to hear about the sort of peer setup that they have there. Go to the next slide. Talking too fast. I'm talking too much. I apologize. So they use the language of engineering, end user instead of audience. They try to use things that students are already working on, including co-curricular deliverables. They do have a required 1-hour pass-fail engineering communication course that students actually have to pass to enter senior design. That's a pretty hardcore requirements that I have to say I'm fond of, but that's hopefully something we might be able to look at some point. Next slide. So the key, I would say, student focused takeaway from this session was, and they literally said this statement: if someone found your executive summary on the street, could they understand your work and what you're talking about? Which is a lot of what drives engineering communication instruction anyway, is can people who are not engineers understand this? Not dumbing it down, not watering it down for a 4th grade audience or something like that. I'm not calling 4th graders dumb, but can you retain the technical side of things and still make it palatable for people who lack a grounding in that field? And so I think that's a very worthwhile goal to have. And then my favorite other thing was my division mixer. My division is the very clunky title of Liberal Education / Engineering and Society. Thankfully, we call it LEES. It's people like me. Back when it was founded back in the 70s, it was actually called Engineering English for real, because it was a lot of writing people. But it has folks dedicated to social justice, LGBTQ plus issues, engineering and society, fine arts, all kinds of stuff. We throw a great party. It was awesome out on this balcony in Minneapolis. So that was a lot of fun to get to connect with these people for the first time in a few years in person. I'm very sorry for taking up so much time. That's my spiel.
Thank you, John.
So I'm actually in the College of Education, so I put a lot of time thinking about pre-college engineering education, as well as I also participate in engineering research methods, educational research methods as well division. So I thought I might list some of the ideas that I heard about for pre-college engineering education. So first of all, we this part of I did a presentation. Tim Faust is in the research group as well, and so we talked about talking about our qualitative research project on understanding how kindergarten through 12th grade teachers of integrated STEM, how they support collective argumentation in their classroom. So how they lead their discussions and the kinds of questions they ask and the other things they do to support students who are learning how to participate in classroom discussion and building a cohesive argument in logical argument in integrated STEM. So we have some teachers who are teaching math lessons and science lessons and engineering, or at least robotics, coding, and integrating those subjects together. So that was I really like doing that. And then in addition to that, I also saw a lot of other ideas that I thought were interesting to at least mention. One of them was about a low cost robotics and modeling software program. I have the title of the talk if anybody's interested in looking up what that additional details on it. And so that was one that is connected to people that are interested in educational robotics, like Professor Mativo. I was going to talk to him about that. Second idea there was really about a play-based engineering education program at Tufts, which I thought was really interesting. Those are some of the curricula and robotics tools that I saw. I also saw a lot about teacher education. So like Professor Fouts, and those are interested in teacher education. One was about teacher efficacy, and there's a lot of interesting ideas about research methods there as well, related to the beliefs and attitude survey that they use to understand teacher efficacy. Second one was there about using virtual simulations to help pre-service teachers learn how to facilitate discussions. And the last one there is someone who works with pre-service teachers who is interested in our research on argumentation. So that was a good conversation and may lead to a potential collaboration. And then the last thing I have there is about people who are working with teachers themselves. So one was about connections between the relationship between teachers' curiosity, confidence, and teaching abilities. That was an interesting conversation, presentation. I really like this idea, this one about trade-offs in engineering design, and there was a lot of conversation about how to help students persevere through failure. And then the last one there was about different approaches to STEM integration, which is as I said, is related to our topic on a research project on STEM integration, but it's I ended up reading a bunch of the papers after the talk, so that was really good to be able to go to it.
John said, ASEE, like John said, ASEE is a huge event full of pretty much everything you could want to engage with around engineering education. So now you've heard just Now you've heard just a couple of the ideas that we keep kicking around year after year in at ASEE. If any of these conferences interested you, I strongly encourage you to be on the lookout for our travel grants in the spring semester. And now we'll transition to the Q&A phase. So if the folks want to maybe gather the chairs a little closer to the center, since we won't be using the projector anymore. And again, during this phase, you can ask a question of any one of them or a question for the whole panel to discuss. Yeah, Mike, hold on. I'll pass the mic to you.
This is for Jasmine. Amy Brooks? Oh yeah, I remember her from years ago. So when you went up, did you know she was going to the conference too? So Jasmine, just to think about, so like, would it have been maybe great or helpful from a graduate student perspective to go up to a conference like that with at least one or two other graduate students that place is overwhelming. When I went with a group of other faculty. We had prearranged how we would meet up and connect with each other. So did you feel kind of lonely a lot of the times up there or out of place or what? Considering what you might say to help other graduate students go and feel more connected.
That's a good point. I personally was okay, but I know that's a very like personal, like some people might find that to be pretty overwhelming. I feel like I found a lot of things to do though, because I wasn't like I obviously knew like our like graduate students from UGA also going, and we did meet up the first night for dinner, so that was helpful. And then I like was able to connect with Dr. Bracato's wife, and we like met up for the yoga session in the morning. So that was helpful to like have that as like a starting point, which maybe gave me more confidence to like, and then I attended one of the like the environmental engineering session and then connected with people there. Then I like would attend a different session with them, if that makes sense. But I guess that's maybe like a personality thing. I don't personally mind doing that, but I think it would be helpful, especially for the deeps, since there's two. The other student didn't go this time, so they could always connect prior to going together, or connect with like a faculty member before, just to have someone that they feel comfortable reaching out to.
You're surrounded by faculty.
There actually were a lot of graduate students. Yeah, and there were like there was specific programming for them too. So like there was.
Well, that's good to hear.
Mhm.
One of the largest divisions there is the student division for graduate students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Thank you. And I'd like to add to that too. When we award the travel grant, it's not just here's some money and then we throw you to the lions of the conference. We host a pre-conference session where we go over, how to navigate the conference, how to find sessions that are of interest to you. And then at the conference, I always host, at least for one night, a dinner for all of the UGA attendees are invited to come to that. And we have a Slack channel that folks can communicate throughout the conference to tell either organize meetups or list conferences that they think people would be interested in. So it's a very sort of like community experience. It's not just we throw you money and then you're on your own.
This is my second time. I went a number of years ago when I was teaching and I didn't know anybody. And although ASEE is very friendly, I found people that I saw 5 years ago who still remembered talking to me. But I think if you're going by yourself from a like small university or something like that, then I think it's really hard. But I think I did feel like there was enough of a community that you could participate in if you felt that way with UGA.
Great. Other questions? Yeah, Kuhn.
I want to ask John a question. So in your engineering writing class, do you have any idea about your student? Like 30 of them are from ECE, 30 of them from mechanical engineering, something like that. And if you have some idea like that, do you plan for your writing assignment? Like this semester, I will give students 4 writing assignment, and then one topic should be related to ECE, one topic should be related to mechanical engineering. Do you have those kind of plan? I would like to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So here so far at UGA, in the undergraduate course, they're all CMB majors. So they're all biological or biomedical. Now the graduate class, pardon me, the graduate class I teach in the spring, it's a variety of areas. But when I was at Mississippi State, I taught every major, sometimes all majors in the same class. And so it would depend on the assignment. Some assignments were the same or similar for everybody, but as much as possible, I like to get students writing in their own discipline and hopefully to use things that they're already working on right now. With graduate students, that tends to be easier because they've got a thesis or a dissertation, or their major professor has given them a manuscript to work on or something like that. Undergraduate students, it can be more challenging because they're taking classes, but they don't really necessarily have projects to use. Capstone students work well for that because they have the project to work on, but that's less than ideal because they're at the end of their time. So really a class like mine needs to be second or third year so that they can get the use out of it that we intend for them to do. But I still try to get them to use things that they've already worked on or projects they've already worked on, internships if they had an experience on an internship that they want to use to write about. Something like that. So I try not to dictate what their content is. You know, I try to give them frameworks for an assignment and things like that. But the content itself, I want them to use their own content because the point is for them to get flexible with their own content and able to explain it for a variety of audiences. The more you write about something, the more you learn about it. So the very act of writing about it and researching it, they're going to learn more about that content area if they're working with that than if I say, well, here's an assignment on blank, and you know, they go learn all they want to about it. There can be value in that, but to me, there's a lot of times much more student buy-in if it's something they're already working on right now. They're already interested in it. Like I have a student this semester who has his own startup, and he's using that startup and a lot of the deliverables they've already worked on for that as some of his writing assignments. And I think it's a lot more meaningful to him because of that, because it's something he's using and he can see the benefit of it outside of the class. So I hope that answered your question.
That would be the individual interest component of motivation for anyone who's had me talk to you about student motivation. I'd like to ask a question of Ben. You mentioned that the teaching professor conference was cross-disciplinary. Were there any sort of techniques that you saw other disciplines leveraging that you thought could be interesting for engineering?
Let me tell you about how bad my memory is. I would love to get back to you on that. I'd have to look into my notes. Sorry, I don't have a satisfying answer for that. I need to think.
If you do think of it, I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, James.
So Rashida, you talked about the conferences that the students went to, NSBE, SHPE, OSTEM, and you mentioned, you know, a lot of positives for the students that are attending those, you know, the networking, the career fair, job interviews and stuff like that, which is, you know, sounds great. What strikes me about those conferences is they're very much student-centric conferences, whereas, you know, obviously the teaching professor conference is for faculty, ASWE is more kind of research focused. So aside from the networking and the career fair and the job interviews, what are some of the things that the students are doing during those conferences if they're not going to research presentations or things like that?
It's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So actually, these conferences, they do have research opportunities where students can present their research if they're interested. There are also a ton of workshops that students can go to, or even professionals, right? I say students, but like even professionals who are at these conferences. Like I went to several workshops. Like one of the workshops I went to was talking about, you know, Black women in sort of like the professional engineering field. There's another workshop about like how to be an ally to the LGBTQIA plus community. There's workshops specific for like students, you know, how to like create better study habits or how to apply for graduate school. So depending on, you know, what your interests are, there are a ton of workshops that are available at a number of these conferences. Like I'm making my SHPE agenda now because it's coming up this weekend, of things that are interesting. And it's also really beneficial to hear people talk who have like a different background. So this weekend will be my first weekend actually going to a SHPE conference, and just being able to sit back and listen to my Hispanic familia talk about their experiences in engineering and what they're doing and how they're progressing in their field. So there is an opportunity for students to present research if they want to. So, and most of those opportunities do come with prizes, sometimes cash prizes. So there are research competitions that students can participate in. There are also a ton of workshops. So if you know, say if you go there and you have your internship already, you know, locked in a bag from the fall or, you know, earlier in the year, then you can go and enjoy a lot of the opportunities. And there's a lot of social opportunities as well. So usually there's some sort of evening activity where, so companies might have hospitality suites where that's another touch point for students to connect and network with folks. There may be like a party or like a bowling or something that allows the students to kind of blow off steam while still being able to connect with people. So there's a lot of professional development. There's career like resume workshop places where you can spruce up your resume, print off your resume. At SWE, they also had yoga. SWE is very inclusive in the fact that like they have daycare and places for what is it? For like breastfeeding for women who are breastfeeding at the time. So there's a lot of different spaces catered to the audiences that they are attracting to these conferences.
Can I answer your question? Not Dr. Warnock. So John, this isn't exactly an answer to your question, but one of the things that I like about an interdisciplinary education conference is that I think a lot of times we pretend like engineering education is wholly different from education in other fields, or it's in some way, yeah, like it's something different. And a conference like this, I like the teaching professor conference, I think shows that there are some axioms, there's some fundamental things that are true in all levels of education. In all fields of education. One thing that this wasn't even from a presentation, but one thing that from a conversation that I had, somebody mentioned how she was teaching grammar and I can't remember. She was teaching, let's say, I can't, let's say grammar. It's not grammar. What is it when you analyze the story? Not comprehension. Not yeah, let's say textual analysis or literary analysis. She was doing that in a second language, right? So I think it was Spanish, but it was in a Spanish curriculum. So her students were mostly non-native Spanish speakers. They had recently learned Spanish and then they're reading Spanish in some literary form and they're trying to analyze that. And she said that, you know, they're trying to apply some basic tools that they probably already know to something in a different language, and they're just trying to, they have to they have to translate the problem before they can ever apply these tools. And I'm realizing that like that's a huge problem for static students as well. They have to translate the problem into something they understand. They think they've seen it before. There's nothing new about the problem that they're seeing, except they've never had to analyze it in the way that I'm asking them to analyze it. So in every way, like just sort of remembering that is a step that students have to do that I don't have to do, right? It's just a reminder that there are some things that are true across education that I think we forget about sometimes when we pretend that engineering education is somehow different. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, that's something that I've been saying for a long time, but I think it's a lot more impactful coming out of your mouth. So thank you. We have time for probably one or two more questions. Who? Oh, we have one from Taiwo over here, and then we'll see about coming back to James. Sorry, Isaac.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I was at ASEE conference and I was at FIE conference, and I was able, I sort of compare and contrast the two conferences. ASEE conference seems to be very big and very large, and sometimes it appears you find which one should I go to, which one should I go to, and sometimes it can be hectic. Compared to FIE conference, that was very small, and I was able to focus, and it appears the talks, the presentations were, grouped in such a way that aligns with something I can always follow, So I'm not sure, did you experience something of that nature, especially for conferences that are very large and you just feel like, which one should I go to, and maybe too overwhelming?
So the observation was there's another conference that we sponsor through the travel grant called FIE, Frontiers in Education, that's run by the IEEE professional organization. It's a much smaller conference, much more focused and generally easier, like less conflicting sessions. But ASEE is huge, and there's always a ton of sessions happening at the same time. Like, how do you even pick which ones you go to? Who would? I see both Ben, John, Ben. So sorry, I was just waiting.
Oh. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. I think with ASEE, I'm not going to say it's the only way to make this work, but what I've done and what a lot of people do is they get heavily involved in a division. So if you belong to a certain division at ASEE, then all of your activities sort of go through that division. So like mine is LEES, as I said, Liberal Education, Engineering, and Society. And though that's sort of my cohort of people that I interact with. And I look, when I go to fill out my schedule, I'd look first only at the LEES session, so that's the only thing that I'm looking at. Now I usually look outside of that a little bit too, for keywords like writing or communication or something like that. But narrowing it that way is one of the best ways to make it, more useful to yourself. The other thing I would say is ASEE has section conferences, so it's not national, but it's at a section level. And UGA is in the southeastern section, which is the largest and most active section in the country. And that section is about half as expensive as national, but it has a lot of the same type sessions, a lot of the same type networking opportunities and so forth. The papers that get published go into peer, so they count just like papers that get published, and presentations at national. So I think those are two ways to really kind of narrow it down. And you do have to narrow it down in some way. You can't just go to ASEE and try to throw your arms around the whole thing. It's just not possible. It's way too big for that. Also, we're actually hosting, UGA is going to host a section conference in 6 years. It's 2028, so it's pretty far off, but we will be having that one here, and I'm already excited about it. I'll be the point person for it and all of that, so that'll be cool to get to show off Athens. But anyway, I don't know if anybody else has any input on that, but that would be my suggestion, is to get involved in a division and sort of focus your efforts on the division instead of just ASEE as a whole.
And if it's your first time attending, ASEE provides a lot of good search tools for their sessions, so you can plan in advance what you want to go to. Unless you really stick to a division like John and I do, I tend to stick to the faculty development division. ASEE is a conference that requires some pre-work before you go, because if you just go there and try to find something of interest, it's very overwhelming. But if you take a little time to look at that stuff beforehand, I think it's very easy to put together a schedule that works for you. All right, we have one more question, and I think James, you raised your hand earlier, so.
I did, and I think you kind of touched on this in the previous question, but this question, I'm going to point at John because you're the campus rep for ASEE at UGA, but anyone feel free to chime in. A lot of us in this room are ASEE members already, either professional members, student members, whatever. Aside from the conference and the other 2,500 people that are going to be there, what are some of the benefits or some of the incentives to being a member of ASEE? What would you say to someone that was thinking about joining the society?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to hand this over to John, and then if others want to chime in afterwards.
I don't have to be the person to. Okay. Yes. Well, I am the campus rep for ASEE. So I can really only speak from my own experience, or I can best speak from my own experience, and that is that what's beneficial to me about ASEE is that it's a group of people, as broad as it is, as much terrain as it covers in terms of divisions and so forth. It's an organization devoted to engineering education and devoted to making student learning better. And I say this all the time, that I always come home from the conference, whether it's a national conference, whether it's a section conference, with pages of ideas of stuff that I want to try that I would not have found out about otherwise. And some of them I don't ever get around to try, and some of them I do, and they're terrible failures. And I'm like, well, that didn't work, but I go on to the next one. So it's a way to communicate with and meet and network and work, collaborate with people who are involved in the same pursuits you are, which is engineering education. There's also a lot of sort of non-conference opportunities with ASEE that you find out about, through emails and so forth, whether it's workshops or they do a lot of, especially with the advent of COVID and the pandemic and so forth, they do a lot of online trainings and things of that nature that are often geared specifically towards certain things, whether it's in, something related to JEDI, or whether it's related to something like social justice, or whether it's related to, there've been a couple recently about, writing in the disciplines and things like that. That I've taken part in. So it's outside of the conferences. There's a lot of resources available for people to use to become better teachers, to create better classroom environments, things like that. So yeah, that's mainly what I would have to say. Anybody else want to chime in with that? I'm not the.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest benefits of ASEE, at least for me, has been the connection to the divisions that are most connected to the work that I do. Like being able to sort of quickly have access to listservs or access to division chairs who can amplify messages or help reach out to answer questions that I have around my field has been amazing. So that is all. Thank you everyone so much for coming. If we could get another round of applause for our presenters. As you're on your way out, I ask that you please be good stewards of the space. If you have food, please make sure that you have disposed of it all in that red trash can at the back of the room. Our next forum will be on November 29th, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. That'll be our distinguished speaker forum. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.